It's been a while since I felt giddy about covering some of these comics, but when you hit a milestone issue like this, which you were so looking forward to when you were a kid, a lot of that excitement does tend to come back. As you can no doubt tell, I was a bit of a Sonic fan as a kid, and I'd had the pleasure of playing the first 3 games in the series, but when I got wind of Sonic CD, my heart sank. Because my family was pretty poor at the time, and the odds of actually getting a Sega CD and Sonic CD to go with it were basically the equivalent of me suddenly crapping out gold nuggets. Not entirely unfeasible, but not likely to happen anytime soon. Lucky for me, Archie had my back in those days, and so I present to you issue 25 of Sonic the Hedgehog, which proudly proclaims itself as an adaptation of the game, in the most limited sense. We only got 24 pages for this thing after all. Starting off, this cover really does stand out to what we've had before. The silver barrier, along with the recolored silver Sonic logo, does seem a bit excessive, but it does make this issue look a bit more distinct up against the other full-sized issue covers around it. And it also focuses your attention more toward the center, in this showdown pose between Sonic and his newest metal doppelganger, Mecha Sonic, with Robotnik looming in the background. We open on, oh my god, it's so busy here. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about this aspect of the comic right away because it's going to be prevalent throughout the whole thing. The layout of this issue is severely different from every issue we've had thus far. A few have gotten close, overlapping some of the panels, but this is the first issue to completely drop anything resembling coherent borders around most of its layout. I mean, look at it! It's certainly interesting, but with the amount of detail put into every single frame, they all tend to blend together and your eye is never sure where to focus on any given page. There's no real flow to these panels. As much as I enjoy this particular issue, I have to admit I have a hard time reading it just because of the way it's laid out. Anyway, let's actually begin talking about the story, shall we? It starts with Rotor fitting some sort of micro camera on Sonic's shoe so that the Freedom Fighters will be able to see what he sees. We'll ignore the fact that at the speed Sonic's moving and the motion of his feet, it would be impossible to actually get a good view of anything, but they seem happy with the result. Even as Sonic crashes into a nearby wall, and Antoine has the reaction that I'd expect most of the audience to have if they try to keep the flow of the panels in this comic straight. I gotta say though, the designs of the characters are really good in this issue. It's pretty damn close to the official Sega artwork, and I do love how expressive and animated they all look. It's difficult to make static images look this animated. Who was the artist on this one? Oh, that explains it. Okay, the overly detailed look makes total sense when you learn that it was Pat Spaziante who did the pencils for this issue. Pat, as I pointed out before, would be most well known in the series for doing the cover art for a good majority of the books, and also doing a lot of internal work for the Archie Mega Man series. Here, though, his style is a bit rough for an internal edge. I've praised his work inside the comic before, but here it feels like he just really went overboard. And this was back before digital art and coloring were standard for things like this. Hell, this issue was still printed on newsprint. I don't even want to think about how long it took to put in all this detail. Anyway, more artistic tangents, sorry. Foregoing the plot of the game, Sally lets us know that some sort of new zone portal is opening up and needs to be explored. As it turns out, it's the Collision Chaos Zone, perhaps my most brilliant creation to date. Yes, as it turns out, the zone and its portal were created by Robotnik, who plans on using the new zone to destroy Sonic, luring him in by appealing to his ego, challenging him to a race. And just to make sure, he's even taken the extra step and stolen all of the fan mail from the comic's Sonicgrams column. Remember kids, tampering with other people's mail is very illegal, and you'll probably end up in a federal prison if you do it. He comes across one letter in particular that is so 12-year-old fangirl, he decides that whoever sent it would make the perfect bait to lure Sonic into his trap. And who was it that sent the letter in the first place? Why, it's Amy Rose, of course, making her debut in the comic right after her debut in the game. And then he, patches into the Freedom Fighters computer network specifically to tell them all of this. And he's even gotten his newest invention to do his dirty work for him. Mecha Sonic, the prototype Metal Sonic, even though the design is basically Metal Sonic and I have no idea why they call him Mecha instead. Must be for the story title pun. And of course, being all about the self-preservation, Robotnik isn't even going to chance the idea of getting close to Sonic, so he has Snively dress up in a startlingly realistic costume of himself so that he can have his minion follow behind Sonic during the race, scorching the earth in hopes of eliminating Sonic that way, if the race doesn't kill him first. Back with the Freedom Fighters, they are, surprisingly, attempting to actually discuss how to go about this particular mission. Of course, Sonic's not one for such formalities and immediately nominates Tails as a spy to go and check on the situation for them. Tails is overjoyed to have a mission on his own again after how poorly a few of his last solo stints have gone. Once he's up in the air, he makes this observation. According to Sally, the zone is west of Robotnik's new factory. I'll swoop down low to avoid being seen. Yep, very next panel, and what happened? Tails went off and got himself captured. Just look at that face. That is the face of tired disbelief right there. Sonic decides that enough is enough, and after not hearing from Tails, decides to head out on his own to begin the rescue operation. When he arrives at the zone, he is confronted with Robotnik, who reveals that he now not only has little Amy Rose, but also Tails as well. And as Sonic boldly jumps into the portal into the zone, Robotnik initiates Operation Burnt Bridges, having Snively starting to follow the Hedgehog and start burning up the road behind him. We cut back to the Freedom Fighters, and boy, we're moving at light speed with this plot. Apparently Sally and Rotor have found something interesting via the Sonic shoe cam that was installed earlier. Sally does a Shaolin handstand, both to show off and to point out that when you look at it upside down, they can apparently see that Snively is trailing Sonic instead of Robotnik. What is the point of this? Not much, really. Cut back to Sonic as he heads through another portal and ends up face to face with Metal Mecha Sonic, who, unlike many of his other appearances, actually has a voice this time. And wouldn't you know it, he's actually pretty close to Sonic in personality. Only evil! He challenges Sonic to a race, and while Sonic thinks it might be a better idea to double back and take a different route, that idea is immediately tossed aside when Snively comes through, burning the ground behind him. While Sonic attacks his robotic doppelganger, much to Robotnik's delight, we get a quick scene where Amy laments that she might never get Sonic to marry her. Yes, folks, believe it or not, Amy was obsessed with marrying Sonic well before her age up in Sonic Adventure, and here it's just a tad less annoying, but far more creepy coming from a 12-year-old. We cut back to Rotor and Sally for a panel. Kindly note that Antoine has apparently disappeared completely, and once again Bunny is nowhere to be seen at all, where Sally announces that it is now time for action. And then we immediately cut to a 2-page spread of Sonic and Mecha trading blows down Stardust Speedway as they attempt to outrace one another. And then we... Hang on, let me catch my breath here. Whew. Okay. We cut to Robotnik at the finish line, demonstrating to Crabmeat, or rather on Crabmeat, his contingency plan should Mecha fail to finish Sonic off before he reaches the finish line, a giant crusher located right above the finish line. Cut back to Sonic and Mecha's race, where I'm momentarily distracted by a gratuitous cameo. Hi, suspiciously recolored Vector, we'll be seeing you sometime down the line. And literally the only reason we cut back to these two was to show that Mecha plays dirty, using a hidden trap to try and trip our hero up. Cut yet again to Rotor and Sally, who are now on a plane above the Stardust Speedway zone, getting a bird's eye view of what's going on. Sally decides to go after Robotnik directly, going all action girl on us, diving out of the plane while leaving Rotor to his assignment, as she calls it. Cutting back to the race, Sonic busts out his super move, the Figure 8 Super Peel Out. Legends were true. Sonic's sudden boost of speed allows him to go to warp drive. Mecha attempts to pursue him, but by pushing himself so hard he ends up overheating, the added heat causing his legs to melt completely and his engine to short out. And then it all comes together in this one-page spread where Sonic crosses the finish line, Sally drops out of the sky and kicks Robotnik before he can activate the Crusher, while Tails and Amy cheer and Mecha lays on the road in the back. And way in the background, Rotor is not doing anything important, just getting Snively to surrender. Robotnik whines that he's been foiled again, but Sonic decides to be sporting and stand underneath the arch despite being well aware that it's a trap. He dodges, and Robotnik, convinced that there must be a fault in the mechanism, goes underneath to check it out, and Sonic even invites you, the reader, to have the honor of pushing the button. Robotnik gets squished and lets out one final
I hate that hedgehog!
Before Sonic and friends celebrate reaching issue 25 and promise plenty more to come in the future. Good God, this issue is all over the place. I said earlier that I actually like this issue a lot, and I wasn't kidding. I genuinely enjoyed it when I first read it years ago, and I enjoy it now. But after looking over it critically for this review, I couldn't really tell you why. There were a lot more problems with this issue than I remembered. Let's start with the obvious. As an adaptation of Sonic CD, well, it's only really an adaptation of the loosest sense of the word. Little Planet is nowhere to be seen or even mentioned, no other zones besides Stardust Speedway show up, and aside from the introduction of Mecha Sonic and Amy Rose, there's not really a whole lot to link it to the game it's supposedly based off of. Hell, with all of the corny jokes and especially the ending bit with Robotnik getting crushed, it seems to have more in common with the weekday cartoon than Sonic CD. I suppose it's understandable given that they only had a single issue to fit everything into, and so decided to go with what was really the climax of the game, the race between Sonic and Mecha. Seriously, is it Metal or Mecha? However, the race isn't really the central focus of the issue, and that leads us into our second problem, its pacing and lack of focus. As you could probably tell, the rapid cuts between scenes are a massive problem with this issue. It not only makes it very difficult to keep track of what's happening, but so many of the scenes could have been cut. Hell, I wouldn't have shed a tear if Sally or Rotor had just stopped appearing in the comic after Sonic left on his mission to rescue Tails and Amy. Their scenes did very little to add to the story, either only reiterating things we already knew or had been told, or just appearing out of obligation. Hell, Sally's biggest contribution to the whole thing is when she kicks Robotnik in the back of the head. And finally, the story was a bit of a tangled web, and unfortunately so was the artwork. Like I said at the beginning of the issue, the layouts are a bit of a mess, and many of the panels seem to blend into one another. And with so many of the panels bursting at the seam with detail, it can make it very difficult to actually follow from page to page. That is a massive shame because taken individually, the details and character art in this issue are pretty phenomenal, ignoring a couple of hiccups here and there. I'm serious, the artwork for this issue is probably the best we've seen in the series yet. When you're not trying to enjoy the story, that is. Well, for a Milestone issue, that could have gone a little bit better. We're moving on to issue 26 next, and it looks like things are about to get frosty. I'm so sorry. See you all next time.